It was a long day. I just got out of the shower. I have a filter on, don't judge me. But we got to talk about this new complaint. I read it all. I have some top line thoughts. Here they are. Number one, once again, this is not a countersuit, even though the news is saying that it is. Every single complaint that gets filed in a court gets its own case number. You file a complaint, you get a case number. You file another complaint, you get a new case number. They open a little file for each case. This case by Baldoni was filed in the same court as Blake Lively's lawsuit, the Southern District of New York, which is the federal court in New York City. But they are two totally separate cases. So yes, he talks about the same things that she talked about, but they are not in the same case. If somebody cares about me explaining whether those things have to be joined together and whether you can have separate lawsuits, somebody tell me and I'll do a short video on that. But for now, they are separate cases. Next thing, I want to pat myself on the back a little bit because it looks like I may have been right about his lawyer, who is like a super fancy LA lawyer who's represented all kinds of famous people. I'm not dissing him in any way. It doesn't look like he's a member of the bar of this federal court. Every federal court you have to like get admitted into that court. And the reason I know that is because at the bottom of this complaint, there's New York lawyers signing it and then him signing it saying, I'm going to be asked to be admitted pro hoc vice, which is what you do when you're a lawyer from a different jurisdiction who's not admitted to that court. I also want to pat myself on the back because as I'm reading this complaint, we get to paragraph 4 and they say, yeah, Blake Lively thought she was going to use the litigation privilege to make all these assertions against Justin Baldoni, but we found ways around that. So look at us go. Okay. Let me say this before I start. One, everyone involved in this whole set of cases is a really good storyteller. All the lawyers are telling great stories. All the complaints make great narratives. This one is no exception. If you can get like ChatGPT or something to read this to you while you're on your way to work or while you're like working in the yard, it is a really fascinating story. Like I hope they make a movie one day about the making of this movie. They will definitely make a documentary about the making of this movie one day. But it's a really good story. And it is Justin Baldoni's full side of the story. I mean, stem to stern. He tells all the stuff that he thinks is true, whether it applies to the actual legal claims at the end or not. All about who he is and his reputation and his brand and all that kind of thing. So what did I see? What jumped out at me? First thing that jumped out at me is that several of the occurrences that Blake Lively notes in her complaints as being the sexual harassment, right, the unwelcome conduct. He refutes that those things happen the way that she describes, of course, but then he also says, oh, and by the way, it's on film. The whole birthing scene situation, he's like, yeah, the whole thing's on film. Like we had the camera going even when we weren't filming the scene. So he claims that he can prove that these things didn't happen this way, at least in part, because he's got it on tape. There's a specific allegation of hers where they were doing like a dancing scene and the sound wasn't supposed to be on. It was just like B-roll of them dancing for like a romance montage, and that he leaned over and said, you smell good or something like that. He's like, first of all, that's not how that happened. And second of all, I can prove that's not how that happened because I was wearing a mic. She didn't know, but I was wearing a mic. So I've got the whole thing on tape. So that's pretty interesting. We'll see if any of that bears out. Here's sort of the big picture in terms of his response to the things that she has stated, even though, again, this is technically a countersuit. He said she's the one who was seeding the bad press after the movie came out. He claims that his PR people and her PR people had like a détente. They had an agreement. Nobody talked to the press. Let's just let sleeping dogs lie and let things happen how they're going to happen. And that her people are the ones that broke the détente and started talking to the Daily Mail. So he's like, this is not us. This was you. He also says in no uncertain terms, Stephanie Jones has lost her mind. She's a lunatic. She is losing all of her clients. I didn't go with Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan because, it was a really hard decision. I had to get away from that woman. She was crazy. She was tanking my reputation. So there's no love lost there. He claims that his breaking point was after the movie had come out, that he was called into an office, I think it's Sony, And he was handed a statement. He and Jamie Heath were handed a statement and said, Ryan and Blake would like you to make this statement that some things happened on the set of this movie that you're really sorry about and that you didn't intend for that to happen and you'll do better next time. And he said that was the straw that broke the camel's back. He said, I let her do her writing and I let her do her wardrobe and I let her do her editing, but that was too much for me. And so he pushed back. And from his perspective, he's the first person in a very long time to tell these people no. And they said, give this statement or we'll ruin you. And he was like, okay, let's go. So that's his version of events. One thing I did see missing from his complaint that she talks about a lot in hers, he did not address at all, was this issue of other people complaining. She claims another actress and other people on set complained about his behavior. He does not even try to address that. She also claims that she made complaints that should be considered sexual harassment, internal complaints that were never investigated and that are the protected activity that serve as the basis for her retaliation claim. He doesn't address those either. I mean, he talks about all the different conversations they had and how they weren't as she described, but he didn't actually come right out and say that. And maybe he won't because this isn't a sexual harassment case. This is a totally separate case. What did he actually sue her for? Her, Ryan, her PR person, and her PR person's company. Okay. Defamation and false light, which is a California law about basically like you lied about me and you made my reputation get tanked. You hurt my image. So none of that is really a big surprise. And he claims this is, it's defamation. It's not litigation privilege because you were saying it to the New York Times and all these other people at WME and all that. So you don't get the litigation privilege for the stuff you said outside of litigation. He's suing for extortion for the statement. You tried to extort me. There are several things that can be both criminal and civil. Theft, assault and battery, and extortion is one of them. So he's claiming civil extortion. There's kind of a boring contract claim in there that I'll talk about later, but it's just sort of like you didn't fulfill your contract obligations like a good person would. He doesn't actually say she breached you. He said you didn't do it in good faith. And then he's got several claims of interference with business relationships and interference with prospective economic opportunity, prospective future opportunities to make money. And that is all based on him getting dropped by WME, his agent. He claims, and I guess he must have a witness, that Ryan Reynolds went up to some WME executive at some screening or some event or something and said, Justin Baldoni is a predator and you guys shouldn't be representing him, and that's why he got dropped. So by making these claims of that, he is putting the truth of that into issue. So that is very, very interesting. And as you guys know from the other videos, by claiming defamation, you put the truth of those things at issue. Couple things, and I'm going to think about it overnight, but the rooftop scene is even more confusing than we thought, and there's a nod to Taylor Swift in there. His lawyer really wants Ryan Reynolds bad. I mean, they go after him more than her, frankly. They're really pissed at him. In terms of whether any of her claims can be shown to be in bad faith, I'm going to look at it again, but I don't think so because it still could be her perspective on things. But there's one thing I'm going to look at because there's one thing that's a little bit odd now that we've heard this other side of the story. And I've been thinking this since the beginning, and I think it even more now. Something happened during that strike. Something happened over that break. I don't know if it was something personal for one of them, if it was something professional for one of them. I don't know. But neither one of them in any of their complaints addresses what happened over a 5-month period when there was a break on filming, except that Justin says that he was editing at the time. Something turned. We don't know what, but something. Questions if you want, and I'll answer them in the morning, but woo, here we go.